Chapter 1. You don't deserve this family's name. Ow. You don't deserve this family's name. Arthur Vine's voice cracked through the dining room like a gunshot. The grand chandelier above trembled slightly, as if it, too, recoiled from the fury lacing his words. The family dinner at Vine House had begun with champagne and roast duck. It ended in the middle of Isla Vine's standoff, a verbal wildfire catching the polished mahogany of family tradition and reducing it to ash in seconds. Isla didn't flinch. Standing at the end of the table, her spine straight and fingers pressed firmly into the back of the antique chair, she held her father's gaze like someone who'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. "Then take it back," she said, her voice low and deliberate, "because I'm not staying silent anymore." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with the echoes of unspoken truths. Crystal glasses trembled in trembling hands. Plates, once artfully arranged with chef-prepared courses, sat untouched. Arthur rose slowly, his presence looming larger with each step around the table. "You want to disgrace this family in front of guests? In our home? Do you even hear yourself, Isla?" "I'm not the disgrace," she snapped. "You are." Aunt Clarice dropped her fork with a metallic clink. Cousin Madeline visibly recoiled, and Theo, Isla's younger brother, froze mid-sip of his wine, eyes darting between their father and sister like he was watching a lion stalk a fox. Arthur's voice grew darker. "What do you think you know?" "I know you lied about what happened to Mom," Isla said, each word a scalpel cutting through years of repression. "You told everyone she had an accident, that she was confused, delusional. But she wasn't. She was terrified." Arthur laughed, sharp and cold. "She was fragile. She couldn't handle the pressure. You of all people should understand that. You're just like her." "No," Isla said. "I'm nothing like her, because I won't let you silence me." The storm behind Arthur's eyes gathered. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I was a judge. I built this house back from scandal. I rebuilt this family name." "On a lie," Isla fired back. "You built it on a grave." A gasp. It came from Madeline, but it rippled around the table like a shiver. Theo stood now. "Isla, what are you talking about?" She turned to him. "Mom kept a journal. She hid it. I found it last week when I was helping clean out her old wardrobe." "You had no right," Arthur began, but Isla cut him off. "She knew things, Theo. She wrote everything down, about what really happened to Uncle Julian." The table froze. It was like speaking a ghost's name. Uncle Julian Vine, the golden brother, the family's pride, gone without a trace 20 years ago. The official story was a disappearance, depression, a hasty goodbye note, and whispers of foreign travel. Arthur never entertained the idea of foul play. Julian made his choice, he'd always said. But now Isla's words hovered over the table like poison. "You're lying," Arthur said. "No," Isla said. "You are." Clarice stood now. "That's enough, both of you." "Arthur, she's grieving. We all are. This isn't the time." "There's never a good time for the truth in this house," Isla said. "Because if there were, Mom might still be alive." She was unraveling, and none of you asked why. Theo stepped closer, voice low. "You're saying Dad." "What? Had something to do with Julian's disappearance?" "I'm saying," Isla said, eyes still locked on Arthur, "that our father killed his own brother." The silence was shattered. "You little witch," Arthur hissed, lunging toward her, but Theo grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "You want to burn this house down? You're going to regret this, Isla." "I already do," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. I regret staying silent as long as I did. Outside, thunder rumbled. The sky over Vine Hill was heavy with storm. Inside, the family sat paralyzed in the wake of Isla's revelation. Forks frozen, wine forgotten, faces blanched. Vine House, for the first time in years, felt cold. Chapter 2: The Vine That Choked. Vine House didn't just sit on the hill overlooking Halstead. It haunted it. Its turrets pierced the sky like watchful eyes, its gray stone walls tangled in ivy and whispered legend. People in town called it the house the vines reclaimed, half in jest, half in fear. To outsiders, it was a grand ancestral manor with stained glass windows and iron gates. But to Isla and Theo, it was a gilded cage, a place where truth was buried under decades of duty and denial. The morning after the confrontation, sunlight filtered in through tall, dust-veiled windows, catching dust motes like suspended secrets. Isla sat curled in the window seat of her childhood bedroom, the tattered journal spread across her lap. Her fingers ran across the edges of its leather cover like she was tracing a wound. Downstairs, she could hear Arthur barking orders at the staff, his voice bouncing off the marble floors. "And make sure the cellar is locked. I don't want anyone poking around down there." She scoffed quietly to herself. He was already scrambling. A knock at her door. She didn't look up. "Come in." Theo stepped in cautiously, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I figured you didn't sleep." "I didn't," she murmured. He handed her one of the mugs and sat on the edge of the bed, eyeing the journal. "You really believe this? That Mom thought Dad killed Julian?" "I don't just believe it," she said, flipping to the page with the torn envelope. "I know it." Theo sipped his coffee slowly, digesting. Why would she hide this? Why wouldn't she just go to the police? "Because she was scared," Isla said, "and because she knew no one would believe her." "You believe her." "I do now," she said. "You should read it, Theo. She talks about everything. The Vine Trust, Dad's money schemes, Julian finding out, and then, suddenly, Julian vanishes and Mom stops writing. There's a gap of 2 months. And when the entries resume, she's different, detached, quiet, like she'd been warned." Theo looked out the window. The grounds below shimmered in the morning mist, the old greenhouse visible near the back edge of the estate. "I remember the night Julian vanished. I was 7. Dad said he left in the middle of the night. But Mom, she was crying in the conservatory for days after. Wouldn't come out." "She never recovered," Isla said. "And then when she started forgetting things, he used it to discredit her. Said she was losing it." Theo's voice dropped. "You think he made her that way?" Isla met his eyes. "I think fear corrodes people slowly." Downstairs, the front door slammed. Arthur's SUV roared to life moments later. Isla stood and moved to the window. She watched him pull away in a storm of gravel. "Where's he going?" Theo asked. "To run damage control," Isla muttered. "He's calling in favors, probably trying to erase what's left." That afternoon, Isla led Theo down the creaking steps into the old wine cellar, the journal tucked under her arm. The stone walls were lined with dusty bottles, each older than the last, but her eyes were on the far wall, the one beneath the dining room hearth. "I think this is where Mom meant," she whispered. "She said she heard him come back through the cellar. She heard the shovel." Theo looked at her like she was unraveling. "You want to dig under here?" She knelt and ran her hand along the base of the wall. A small patch of concrete looked newer, less aged than the rest. She tapped it. Hollow. Theo took a shaky breath. Jesus. Suddenly, a soft mechanical click echoed above them. The cellar lights dimmed. Then another voice, sharper, from above. You shouldn't be down there, Arthur's voice crackled through the house's old intercom system. That part of the house is off limits. Isla stood, defiant. You're watching us now? No, Arthur said. I've always been watching. She grabbed Theo's hand and yanked him toward the stairs. Let's go, before he decides to seal us in. Later that night, they sat outside beneath the twisted limbs of the old willow tree. Isla lit a cigarette, hands still shaking. I'm going to dig, Theo, she said. At the greenhouse. That's where she says he buried the truth. Theo's voice cracked. And if you find him? Then we burn the whole lie down, she said, starting with Dad's reputation. He stared out over the vineyard stretching beyond the trees. You know if we do this, there's no going back. Isla exhaled smoke, watching it disappear into the night. We've already left. Chapter 3, The Letter. It was almost dawn when Isla returned to her room, the journal clutched tight against her chest like armor. The house was dead silent. Even the old pipes seemed to hold their breath. She placed the leather-bound journal on the desk beneath the window and stared at it like it might breathe. Her fingers found the envelope again, the one tucked between the final pages, creased, faded, and labeled in her mother's elegant handwriting. To Isla, in case he ever turns on you? Her breath caught as she peeled the envelope open, heart thudding. The letter inside was short, a single page. No signature, just her mother's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Arthur isn't who he says he is. Julian didn't disappear, he found out. About the money, the Vine Trust, the donors. He confronted Arthur that night. I heard the gunshot. I ran outside, but it was too late. He said Julian attacked him. He said it was self-defense. I didn't see a weapon, I saw fear. On Arthur's face, not guilt, fear of losing everything. He made me swear I would forget, that no one would believe me. He buried Julian under the greenhouse, said it was poetic, vines over vines. If you're reading this, it means I failed to forget. Don't make the same mistake. Isla reread it 3 times before lowering the page. Her hands trembled. The greenhouse. She pressed her forehead to the glass window, watching as the first fingers of sunrise stretched over the horizon. The greenhouse was just visible through the fog, its shattered panes cloaked in overgrown ivy and moss. Forgotten, just like Julian. Suddenly, the door burst open. Theo. He was out of breath, still in his hoodie, hair tousled. You up? She turned, startled. You scared the hell out of me. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about last night, about what you said. She held the letter out without a word. He took it and sat on the edge of her bed, reading silently. As he reached the final lines, his mouth pressed into a hard line. Jesus. She knew, Isla said. All these years. And she tried to live with it, tried to keep us safe, but it broke her. Theo stood and paced. He said Julian left town. He said he was mentally unstable, that he'd drained part of the trust funds to go off-grid. Everyone believed him. Because he was Judge Arthur Vine, Isla muttered. The man who built orphanages, who gave commencement speeches at law schools, who kissed babies on election nights. Theo looked out the window. You think the body's still there? Only one way to find out. Later that morning, Arthur Vine sat in his study, a glass of dark scotch in hand, staring at the fireplace like it owed him an explanation. The intercom crackled. Mr. Vine? It's Harold. The private security team just called. There was movement near the greenhouse last night. 2 figures. Want me to check the cameras? No, Arthur said flatly. Delete the footage. A pause. Sir? You heard me. He stood slowly and walked to the bookshelf, 3rd shelf, 5th book. He pulled it out and reached behind. A safe. Inside, a folder labeled Confidential, Vine Trust, and a USB drive. He took both and locked them in his desk drawer instead. She's getting too close, he muttered. Far too close. That afternoon, the greenhouse creaked under its own age. Ivy grew thick along the cracked glass, curling around the rusted hinges of the door. The smell of old soil and something more metallic hung in the air. Isla held the shovel with white-knuckled hands. Theo paced behind her. This is crazy. We could go to the police. With what? She snapped. A letter from a dead woman? They'll say Mom was paranoid, delusional. He made sure everyone believed that. Theo stopped. So what happens if we do find something? She looked him in the eyes. Then we dig up the truth. And we burn him to the ground. She jammed the shovel into the earth. The soil was dense, packed with decades of silence. Sweat beaded her forehead. Theo joined her, shoveling in tandem. After 15 minutes, her shovel hit something solid. Thunk. She knelt, brushing away the dirt with trembling fingers. Rotten fabric. A collapsed jacket sleeve. Something metallic caught the light, half buried in mud. She reached down, heart hammering. A wedding band. Gold. Inscribed on the inside. Julian Vine. Theo backed up, stumbling into an overturned flower pot. Oh my God! Isla sat back on her heels. Her voice was barely a whisper. He's here. They stared at each other as the truth finally, completely pulled itself into the light. Chapter 4. The Uncovering. The shovel slipped from Isla's hand and landed with a dull thud beside the shallow grave. Theo stood frozen, his breath misting in the cool air despite the morning sun climbing higher. The unearthed space beneath the greenhouse was raw, violated. A wound long hidden, now bleeding history. Julian Vine had been there all along, 20 years beneath soil and lies. Not lost, not missing, murdered. Theo took a shaky step back. This can't be real. Isla crouched lower, brushing the edge of the jacket again. She uncovered what remained of a shoulder, the degraded remnants of bone clothed in earth-stained fabric. Time had consumed most of him, but not all. Enough remained to scream the truth. It's him, she said quietly. He never left. Theo looked like he might throw up. This is a crime scene. She turned to him. Which makes us witnesses, not trespassers. Jesus, he whispered. He killed his own brother. And Mom knew. She lived with him for 20 years. Isla stood, her hands trembling with soil and rage. And now she's dead. Alzheimer's didn't kill her, Theo. He did, slowly. He paced, gripping his hair. We need to call someone. The police. A lawyer. I don't even know. Not yet, she said, her voice sharp. What? We need evidence. Something more than bones. Something they can't dismiss as some old family squabble gone cold. Dad still has power, Theo. Friends. Pull. You think he could bury this again? I think he already has. She turned to him, eyes flaring. We dig more. We find everything. And then we take it public. News, media, the world. We don't let him talk his way out of this like he always does. Theo was silent. The wind stirred the ivy. Somewhere far off, a bird called oblivious. Then he nodded. Okay, let's finish it. That night, Arthur Vine sat by the fireplace, sipping his second scotch. The fire cracked softly, the only sound in the cavernous drawing room. He stared into the flames. Julian, he said aloud, voice barely above a breath. You always were the reckless one. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was an old wristwatch, classic, silver engraved. AV to JV. Brothers always. He closed the box slowly, then turned as the door creaked. It was Harold, the house's longtime groundskeeper. His eyes were wary. You have a visitor, sir. Arthur raised an eyebrow. At this hour? Harold stepped aside, and Theo entered, arms crossed, face unreadable. Arthur's mouth twitched. Come to apologize? Theo ignored the jab and stepped closer to the fire. You lied about everything. About Mom. About Julian. Arthur's smile vanished. You found the journal, he said flatly. Theo didn't answer. Arthur stood slowly, setting his glass down with precise care. You don't understand the pressures I was under. The trust was hemorrhaging. Julian was going to ruin everything our father built. So you killed him? Theo's voice cracked. Arthur's eyes narrowed. He attacked me. There was no weapon. He lunged. I reacted. It was fast, confusing, regretful. Theo's hands balled into fists. You buried him like trash. I buried a mistake, Arthur snapped. You think people care about truth? About nuance? They care about legacy, image. I protected this family. You destroyed it. Arthur's voice dropped. And if you expose this, you'll destroy what little remains. Theo stepped forward. The difference is, I can live with that. He turned and walked out before his father could reply. Arthur stood alone in the firelight, the shadows clawing at his face. Meanwhile, Isla scoured her mother's old boxes in the attic. Dust choked the air, but she dug like a woman possessed. Letters, receipts, photos. Then, something. A ledger. Bound in deep green, brittle at the edges. The Vine Trust Financial Records, 1999 to 2003. She flipped through. Millions transferred. Redirected. Donors unaware. Funds hidden behind shell organizations. Julian had marked pages in red ink. Unaccounted. Suspicious. One margin note read, Talk to Marianne. Something's off. Can't let Arthur move the Belize accounts without oversight. Isla slammed the book shut. Her hands shook. Julian had uncovered the truth and paid the price. She took out her phone and snapped photos of every page. Then she copied it to a flash drive and tucked it in her coat pocket. Back downstairs, Arthur stood at his study window, staring into the dark grounds. Lights flicked on near the greenhouse. Someone was out there again. He dialed a number. A voice answered. Activate the contingency. A pause. The greenhouse? The voice asked. Arthur's face twisted into something dark. Burn it. Chapter 5. The Pact Breaks. The wind howled through the trees as Isla and Theo walked back toward Vine House, shovels slung over their shoulders, soil clinging to their clothes. Neither of them spoke. Their silence was a fragile truce, heavy with what they had unearthed and what they had not yet dared to imagine. It wasn't just Julian's bones beneath the greenhouse. It was the root of every lie. They were halfway up the gravel path when the scent hit Isla first. Sharp, acidic, unmistakable. "Do you smell that?" she asked. Theo stopped, his nostrils flared. Gasoline. Then they saw it, a flicker of orange in the distance. Isla turned, eyes wide. The greenhouse. They dropped the shovels and ran. By the time they reached the edge of the garden, flames had swallowed the old glass structure. Ivy burned like paper. Shards of glass exploded outward. Smoke twisted into the night sky. "No!" Isla screamed. "No! No! No!" Theo held her back as she lunged toward it. "Isla, it's too late!" She watched in horror as the fire consumed the shallow grave. Bones turned black. Ash and memory rose into the air. "He's destroying the evidence," she choked. Theo stared, pale and stunned. He knew. "Of course he knew," Isla spat. "He always knows." Minutes later, back at the house, Isla burst through the doors, feet pounding across the marble floors. Arthur was waiting on the staircase, calm as a priest. He leaned against the banister, still in his evening clothes, as if he hadn't just erased a 20-year-old murder with one match. "Something wrong?" he asked mildly. Isla stormed up the stairs. "You burned his body." Arthur's eyes flickered with something between amusement and contempt. "That's a dangerous accusation." "You erased him," she snapped. "The fire. The gasoline. You sent someone, didn't you?" "I was here all night," he said smoothly. "And I have staff who can confirm it." Theo appeared in the doorway, dirt still on his clothes. "You'll never get away with this." Arthur descended a step, his expression hardening. "Do you think people care about skeletons in the ground? About old brothers who disappeared after drinking too much and mishandling money?" Julian was unstable. His name was already stained. "All you've done is confirm a family tragedy." Isla clenched her fists. "He was going to expose you." Arthur stepped closer. "And you think you'll succeed where he failed?" She stared up at him, voice cold. "I don't think. I know." He smiled thinly. "You've always had your mother's dramatic flair. But she didn't win, and neither will you." That night, Theo sat on Isla's bedroom floor, staring at the flash drive she'd made of the ledger. "You really think the press will care?" he asked. "About money laundering from 20 years ago?" Isla looked out the window, watching smoke drift from the charred greenhouse. "I don't care what they care about," she said. "I'm going to make them care." Theo exhaled. "So what's the plan?" She turned. "We take everything to the press. The journal, the financials, the recordings." "Recordings?" She pulled out her phone and played back the audio she'd secretly taken from Arthur's confrontation earlier. "Do you think people care about skeletons in the ground?" Julian was unstable. "All you've done is confirm a family tragedy." Theo stared at her. "You're insane." She gave a tight smile. "No, I'm desperate." Elsewhere, Arthur sat in his study, flipping through old files. His phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Vaughn and Associates, his crisis management firm. He answered with a sigh. "What now?" A clipped voice replied. "Mr. Vine, you may want to sit down." "Why?" "There's been a leak. A journalist from the Halstead Courier just sent inquiries regarding the Vine Trust, the missing funds, and a letter allegedly written by your late wife. Arthur's hand tightened on the phone. They have the letter? We don't know what they have, but they're printing tomorrow. Arthur's jaw clenched. Shut them down. We're trying, but try harder. He ended the call. For the first time in years, his hand trembled. The next morning, Isla woke to the vibration of her phone. Her inbox was flooded. Subject: urgent. Halstead Courier front page. Judge Vine, trust funds, and the brother who vanished flum. She threw back the covers and bolted upright. Theo was already in the hall, phone in hand. They ran it, he said. Her stomach flipped. He held out his screen. A photo of Arthur. A black and white image of the Vine Trust board in 2002. And beneath it, exclusive. Judge Arthur Vine accused in brother's disappearance, trust embezzlement. Daughter speaks out. At breakfast, Arthur entered the dining room dressed impeccably. The newspaper lay neatly folded at the center of the table. He picked it up slowly. His hands didn't shake now. He read the headline once, then twice. Then he laughed. A low, bitter sound. So it begins. Chapter 6. A Family Divided. The front lawn of Vine House had never seen so many cameras. News vans lined the curved driveway like vultures in a feeding circle. Reporters stood behind caution tape, microphones extended, snapping photos of every person who entered or exited the estate. The air buzzed with tension, and the once pristine gardens now looked like the backdrop to a scandal opera. Isla watched it unfold from the upstairs window. Day 1, she muttered. Theo stood beside her, arms crossed. It feels like we detonated a bomb. We didn't, Isla said. We just stopped hiding the crater. Down below, a journalist shouted, Miss Vine, can you confirm the journal's authenticity? Did your mother name your father as Julian Vine's killer? A security guard stepped in, shielding the path. A second reporter yelled, Is it true that Judge Vine manipulated the Vine Trust to launder donations overseas? Isla closed the curtains and turned away. They'll keep coming. Theo sighed. What about the police? Do they even care? She showed him the email on her phone. Halstead PD response. Thank you for your submission. Your claims are under internal review. We are currently evaluating jurisdiction, as statute of limitations may apply to financial matters. Regarding the remains discovered, further investigation has been delayed due to the greenhouse fire and compromised site conditions. Theo stared at the screen. They're brushing it off. No, Isla said. They're afraid of him. Later that day, the doorbell rang. Arthur stood in the foyer in silence, flanked by two men in dark suits. The door opened. 3 officers entered. One held a folder. Judge Vine? Arthur didn't blink. Yes. We're here to inform you that you are under preliminary investigation regarding the allegations published this morning. Financial misconduct, witness intimidation, and possible obstruction of justice. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Allegations from my mentally unstable daughter, based on her dead mother's diary. The officer didn't flinch. You'll need to come with us to answer some questions. Arthur smoothed his tie. You'll find my answers quite thorough. Isla watched from the stairwell, her stomach churning as the front door closed behind him. In the kitchen, Theo sat at the table, head in his hands. I don't get it, he muttered. He's being investigated, and he still walks around like he's untouchable. Isla poured coffee, her expression hard. Because that's how predators survive. They keep their cool while everyone else burns. Theo looked up. We burn the whole legacy. No, she said. We expose the truth, He burned it himself. We just lit a match under his lies. He frowned. You're not scared? I'm terrified, she said softly. But we're already in it. There's no going back. That evening, Aunt Clarice barged into the manor without knocking. You selfish brat, she snapped at Isla before she even reached the parlor. Isla rose from the sofa, steeling herself. Hello to you too. You couldn't just leave it alone, could you? You had to drag this family into the mud. I didn't drag anyone. Arthur buried it. I just unearthed it. Clarice's voice shook. Julian is dead. Your mother is dead. And now you want to ruin Arthur? Destroy the only legacy this family has left? Isla stepped closer. He murdered his brother. He robbed donors. He gaslit Mom until she lost her mind. Clarice slapped the arm of a chair. He kept this family together. You think I didn't know about the trust? About Julian's threats? We made sacrifices to protect what we had. Isla's voice rose. You knew? Clarice didn't back down. I knew enough. Enough to stay quiet. Theo entered the room just in time to hear that. You all knew, he said, voice hollow. Every one of you. Clarice turned to him, softer now. We were trying to preserve something bigger than ourselves. Isla's lip curled. Then you're as guilty as he is. Clarice stared at them both, then turned away. You've brought shame to this house. I hope it was worth it. She left the same way she came, fast and furious. That night, Isla sat alone in her room, the house unusually quiet. She opened her mother's journal again, flipping to the final pages. There were water stains there, possibly tears, possibly age. They say memory fades. But I remember the look in Arthur's eyes that night. He was afraid. Not of guilt, of loss, of exposure. He loved this house more than he ever loved me. I told him one day, Isla would know that she'd put it all together, and that she wouldn't stay quiet like I did. If you're reading this, my brave girl, don't stop. Isla closed the journal and held it to her chest. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck midnight. Meanwhile, Arthur sat alone in a sterile room at the Halstead precinct, facing two detectives. One leaned forward. Why was your brother's body found on your property? Arthur smiled faintly. Bodies are easy to bury. The real challenge is burying a reputation. Chapter 7. The Last Inheritance. Vine House had never been so quiet. No journalists. No police. No housekeepers. Just the creak of old wood and the whisper of ghosts. It was as if the estate knew the end had come. Isla stood in the hallway, staring at the grand oil painting of the Vine family, painted 20 years earlier, just before Julian vanished. Her mother looked serene. Arthur looked proud. Julian, smiling awkwardly, had his hand on Isla's shoulder. She reached up and touched the canvas gently. Then Theo appeared at the top of the stairs. They're here. She turned. The lawyers. In the parlor. 3 legal representatives from Levinson and Graham, the firm that had handled the Vine family's estate for generations, stood stiffly in tailored suits, briefcases open, files neatly arranged. The lead attorney, a woman named Petra Marsh, cleared her throat. As you know, Judge Arthur Vine amended his will 3 weeks ago, shortly after media inquiries began surrounding the Vine Trust and your uncle's disappearance. Isla and Theo sat side by side. Neither spoke. Petra continued. Per the updated documents, the entire estate, the house, its contents, the surrounding vineyard, and associated historical land has been transferred to the Halstead Historical Preservation Society, effective immediately upon his death. Isla blinked. He gave away the house? Theo sat up straighter. He planned to die? Petra nodded solemnly. He's not dead. But he has declared, through his legal proxy, that he is done with the Vine legacy. She handed them a document. You may read it. To my children, who chose betrayal over family. You were never meant to inherit this. Not the house. Not the name. Isla, your mother called you brave. I call you foolish. Theo, you followed your sister like a sheep. You had promise once. This house no longer belongs to you. I built it. I buried it. And now I have entombed it in stone and paper. Let the Preservation Society restore it as a monument to what you both destroyed. Isla stared at the words. He's sealing the house as a tomb. Petra spoke again. Additionally, the family fortune once valued at just over 18.2 million has been redirected. To whom? Theo asked. To a private legal fund for retired judges, Petra replied. And a foundation for ethical reform in media practices. Isla laughed once, sharp and bitter. He's paying off his reputation. Petra hesitated. However, there is a codicil. The room stilled. Petra opened a smaller envelope and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Your mother left a separate trust. It was hidden until now. Theo leaned forward. A trust? Petra nodded. Marianne Vine created a sealed legal directive before her illness progressed. It activates only if her journal, or proof of Julian's murder, ever comes to light. Isla's throat tightened. She planned for this. Petra looked at her. Yes, the trust is worth $3.1 million. It is yours. Only yours. Theo looked stunned. She protected you. Isla swallowed hard. She remembered. That night. Isla walked alone through the house, room by room. The nursery. The gallery. The west wing her mother had locked up after Julian vanished. She paused in her mother's old writing room. The air still smelled faintly of lavender and ink. On the desk was a single object, the gold-framed photograph of Julian and Marianne, laughing at a summer picnic long ago. She picked it up and whispered, I kept my promise. Meanwhile, Arthur Vine sat alone in the windowless cell of Halstead Correctional, dressed in plain gray. No cufflinks, no scotch, no books of law to shield him. He stared at the wall, then at the ceiling, then at his hands, calloused now. He whispered to himself, let them have the ashes. Outside, Isla stepped onto the porch as a group of preservationists arrived. Here to measure the rot? She asked one of them. The woman gave her a polite smile. We're here to preserve the legacy. Isla looked out over the vineyards, half dead, withered under years of mismanagement. Good luck, she muttered. Theo came outside behind her, holding a small box. What's that? Letters, he said. Julian's. I found them in the attic, hidden under the old piano bench. Dozens. He handed her one. To Isla. If you ever find this, don't let him rewrite history. You deserve to know the truth. You always did. Don't be afraid to tell the world. Love, Uncle Julian. Isla folded the letter and stared at the sun setting behind the hills. We lost everything, Theo said quietly. She shook her head. We didn't. He looked confused. We lost a lie, she said. We kept our names, our choices, the truth. Chapter 8. The roots remain. 3 months later, Vine House stood silent and sealed. A high iron fence surrounded the property now, topped with fresh security cameras and a hand-painted sign that read, Vine Heritage Trust, Historical Site, closed to the public. Inside, the once lively halls echoed only with footsteps of contractors and preservationists cataloging furniture, documenting wallpaper patterns, and removing items for archiving. They walked softly, reverently, as if afraid to wake the dead. Downtown Halstead. Isla sat on a park bench across from the courthouse, watching as a new plaque was being unveiled. In memory of Julian Vine, advocate for truth. Betrayed, but not forgotten. The dedication had been Theo's idea. He stood a few feet away, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, staring at the crowd with quiet pride. A small group of local reporters snapped photos. Several former Vine Trust beneficiaries had come. A few even approached Isla to thank her for exposing the corruption, for reopening grants that had mysteriously disappeared under Arthur's direction. You gave us back our stories, one woman said, tears in her eyes. Isla nodded quietly. He tried to erase more than a brother. He erased people. Later that day, Theo found her at their mother's grave. The cemetery was still, wind brushing the grass. The headstone read simply, Marianne Ellen Vine, 1949-2023. She remembered. Isla knelt beside it, placing a white rose. She never gave up, Isla said softly, even when her memory betrayed her. She left me a map. Theo crouched beside her. You followed it. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the birds, the wind, the ache.